So looking at the common mistakes that I end up seeing, the fitness professional often focuses on strength. So they might hear from the client that they have a rotator cuff problem. So then they end up focusing on strength, strengthening the shoulder. And strengthening the shoulder is kind of a fine balance because we end up having three muscle groups in the shoulder. You got the primary movers, um, the superficial muscles, deltoid, pec major, lats, large muscle groups. Then you end up having the rotator cuff, which really stabilize that humeral head. And then you'll end up having those scapular stabilizers, which end up moving that scapula in order to keep that rotator cuff in an optimal length tension relationship so it can do its function. Now, oftentimes when it comes to primary movers, they tend to be fine in most shoulder injuries. A lot of times it's the other two that end up being affected, rotator cuff and scapular stabilizers. So focusing on traditional strength training that you see in the gym, you end up missing the two areas that you really need to focus in on, which is the rotator cuff and the scapular stabilizers. So you need to include strength, but I'll show you when you need to include strength. Another mistake is ignoring isometrics. So isometrics is a low intensity muscle contraction where there's no joint movement. So what I found with doing isometrics when it comes to the rotator cuff, a lot of times you end up helping activate the scapular stabilizers, which work hand in hand with the rotator cuff. And also doing those isometrics specifically for the rotator cuff end up helping when it comes to the range of motion, in the glenohumeral joint. Ignoring range of motion. So you might end up seeing a client and you might think they have full range of motion, and they might have functional range of motion, but they might not have full range of motion. And if you get them to go through full range of motion and see that they're missing some end range of motion, that's something that you need to work on, because it ends up showing you that there's a muscular imbalance, that there might be one of the shoulder muscles might be tight, or it might end up meaning that you need to do the isometrics in order to help work on those scapular stabilizers. And then number 4 is not addressing the scapular stabilizers. And I'll kind of go through an exercise program that addresses all of those.